Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey AJ, thank you for your good evening in the chat. I'm so sorry guys that I had to postpone my stream for 1 hour, or by 1 hour. At any rate, now we are here for a very interesting stream into the many reasons why PZB, punctuelle Zugbeeinflussung, the German safety system, is so complicated. Yeah, a lot of things were going on in the past hour, so I decided to just start a bit later so that the Tour de France and the final of the European Championship in football for the women was over, and now I'm actually here. And Raven's lofty evening Tiger, he says, yeah, I don't know if you are into football. Congratulations to the 3 Lionesses for winning the European Championship. Everything is over. CD Radar, see you around. Nice to have you on the stream. No American content today, so you can stay and take part in discussing what we're doing. It's actually quite a complicated topic that we're talking about. I thought I started with the Expert 101 locomotive, but then I stumbled across the fact that the directives issued by the Infra GO, the German infrastructure manager, concerning PZB especially, also LZB and GNT, will be revised almost completely for 2026, and I think I want to talk about this today. And CD Radar says, how do you know I wasn't there last time? Because you did not say a word, and since you are a known fan of American railways and American content, I thought this scared you away. But if you were there, all the better. And today we're talking about German stuff, German rules, and about PZB and the rules for it. And this actually, if anyone thought, well, PZB might be a bit complicated, but it is not really complicated. Well, today we will look into all the rules and we see how complicated it really is. No one annoying in the chat, and so you did not say anything to not annoy anyone. Well, I'm happy that you're here, CD Radar. And yeah, let's jump into a new DLC that I got for free for being an ambassador. Not all the DLCs that we will see today I got for free. Some I actually picked up in the Epic Game Store sale. So if you are on Epic Game Store, check out the summer sale until the end of the month. There are a lot of opportunities. Some DLCs 90% off. If you did not pick up the Acelas, for example, pick it up for less than $2 at the moment. So check it out, and maybe you'll find something that is still missing in your collection. So I picked up the Trucks 3, the 187, for example, and some smaller DLCs. And CD Ray says, I was on holiday actually, so it was good you did American stuff. Alright, perfect. So nice to have you back from your holiday. I hope you are all all cozy now and back in action. Game is playing a lot. I wanted to do the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn. I have not seen a lot of it yet, but what I've seen, it's actually a really nice route, and it reminded me a bit of Ruhr-Sieg Nord, at least in the part between Kaiserslautern and Neustadt an der Weinstraße. And yeah, let's drive an ICE train to mention a problem that we always had and still have with the ICE display for PZB on the newer versions that we find. For example, on the 411, the ICET that comes to Frankfurt Fulda. And you remember that all too well, we cannot really distinguish between a restricted and a non-restricted PZB monitoring, because the PZB indicator, the 85 typically, is flashing in the same way regardless whether it is a restricted or a not restricted monitoring. And with the directives that we have from the DB Infra GO at the moment, we couldn't really verify what was that the system was supposed to do in a case like this. And now, starting in December 2025 for 2026, we now, for example, have a directive that tells us exactly what the train should be doing in this case. But first, let's drive a bit. And CDRA is going to Vienna on Thursday. That is nice to hear. It's always great to go to Vienna. Unlock doors. Where is my platform? It is to the right, actually. So let's open the doors.
Türen geöffnet.
Störung. Störung.
Well, the 411 does not say WB gesperrt, because it does not have a WB, it does not have a Wirbelstrombremse. So that is good already. Beleuchtung. All train lights are lit, that is good. AFB.
AFB.
Closing the doors.
Schließvorgang eingeleitet.
We've got a high green already. No kneeling tigerways, I see. No, I would have to find a way to bring the tigerways livery to the ICET. Do we have headlights? Oops, what did that? Normal is just enough. So, kneeling ICE is starting at Kaiserslautern. Kaiserslautern, everyone connected with football obviously knows Betzenberg, Fritz Walter. And we're starting our journey. We are supposed to stop at Neustadt on the Weinstraße and then finally end up at Mannheim after having passed Ludwigshafen. You can see the 85 indicator is flashing. We know that it is the startup program, so it should indicate that it is a restricted monitoring, but it does not. We can break free anyway.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Because we got a high green and don't have to be prepared for a new monitoring. It's early morning, 7:30. And we're leaving Kaiserslautern. The MFD, the multifunctionsdisplay cap indicator display that we are using here on this train, is the most modern one that we probably have in the game. It is already set up for use of ETCS. We can see that from those icons on the bottom of the screen, and from the indication here to the left showing us that we're running on full PZB. And LZB mode. Obviously it's not functional. It tells us that ETCS is switched off. That's what this icon here is telling us. So I'm still hoping that sooner or later, maybe with Train Sim World 6, we will finally see some more ETCS in the game, because it's a bit ridiculous almost that the current train protection systems are not really implemented in the game at all. Yep, we are in the 150 range and we are running through the woodland area here. No GNT, no LZB on this line, so it is a full PZB experience. For the trains that are running here. If you don't want to use the tilting ICE, then this DLC supports the 406. So what are you going to do in Vienna, CD Radar? Are you on a holiday or reduction to 30 income, 130 incoming?
Zugbeeinflussung.
Or are you there as part of a delegation to discuss the introduction of flashing red signals? Some Felixing and S-Bahn spotting till Sunday. Well, that sounds good. For me, it's only 2.5 weeks to actually go to the ambassador meeting at the DTG HQ at Chatham.
Zugbeeinflussung.
So that will definitely be interesting, what will be happening there. Never ever expected to be invited to an event of that kind.
Zugbeeinflussung.
LF6 sign gets repeated here. And here's the LF7 for the 100. I think we're running mostly downhill here. So when we're going from Kaiserslautern towards Mannheim, most of the time we have to make sure that our train does not overshoot. Actually a really long one, 411. So I don't know how you are feeling about it, but this first part really gives me the most pleasant vibes that I know from Rossignol. Some tunnels with a lot of woodland, sometimes hugging a road. 125 trains are doing the S-Bahn work here. "17 kilometers to Neustadt an der Weinstraße, formerly also known as Neustadt an der Hart. Slow down to 80,
Beeinflussung.
and we're actually getting 1000 hertz. LF6 repeated, because it is behind a stopping point most probably. See the radar, and at the end of August we're going on holiday to Graz, so after a long time I will take a look at the Semmeringbahn. Oh, that is cool. So actually going via Wiener Neustadt and Glockenitz. Yeah, hey Juniper, nice to see you. A train derailed this night in Germany, multiple deaths. Yes, last thing that I read, deaths had not been confirmed, but a derailment in Baden-Württemberg, a regional train. Cause unclear. Obviously it makes you think of the Garmisch-Partenkirchen-Fachland train accident a couple of years ago. That was because of a faulty sleeper and some decay that was happening in the concrete that the sleeper was built out of. And there was always a discussion that sleepers of this kind and from this period that can get faulty in this special way are still in use all across the network. And now in connection with bad weather, it makes you wonder, obviously, right? But we will have to see. Incident report of the Unabhängige Untersuchungsstelle für Eisenbahnunfälle, the German and TSB equivalent, has just been published in June. A very lengthy one. And discussing the problem that comes out of the fact that concrete sleepers of this area or of this era are still in use, and it might not totally be clear where across the network they are still in use. Limit increase to 100. I mean, don't actually know how long we are. Are we longer than 400 meters? No, so 400 meters should be okay to increase to 100. 11 kilometers to Neustadt an der Weinstraße. Limit to 90.
Flugbeeinflussung.
Here it is. LF7 for the 90. Thank you. Adrian was kind enough to make some coffee. Limit back to 100 here. When approaching Neustadt, after Neustadt, the scenery will change significantly. And what's really impressive here in this DLC is that part through Ludwigshafen. It's a really impressive part of railway architecture. With a lot of track and switches. I've not gotten around to check out how much of it can actually be used in the game, but it looks great. Freight train has to wait. No, it's just going slowly. The Vectron with the L cars. So 5.5 minutes for 6.5 kilometers. I think we're not doing that badly. News reports at first sight it looks like an earth avalanche from heavy rain. Alright. Like a landslide. Well, we have to see. It's always difficult not to jump to conclusions in situations like this.
Flugbeeinflussung.
Limit to 90 announced. Here is the LF7 for the 90. Yeah, and apart from that, if landslide makes the train derail, you always have to check your safety concepts, because that actually should not be a thing to happen. Three kilometers, so we actually can prepare for the stop already. Two and a half minutes for 2.6 kilometers. Well, mustn't dawdle too much. Increase to 100. Probably won't do this. Or will we? Does not really make sense if we have to stop in 1.5 kilometers. But if we wanted to, we'd be allowed to. Yes, Sifa lady. You're here as well, we know. Neustadt an der Weinstraße. You can see a lot of those Fahrtanzeiger signals in this DLC. Sometimes lit even if the signal is red, from what I've seen. It's not always to be trusted. But from what we heard from Ronnie, this is something that can happen in real life as well. So, they want us to go to the very end of the platform, so that the S-Bahn can overtake. Bit late.
Türen geöffnet.
Türen geöffnet. So the doors are open. The train is sitting here at the platform nicely at Neustadt an der Weinstraße, and this allows us to dive into today's presentation. But before we actually go into the presentation, where did it go? I wanted to start with something else, with the website of DB Infra GO. For that, I prepared this one. You can see this is the website that everyone can access, DB Infra GO, the German infrastructure manager. And here you can find the betrieblich-technisches Regelwerk, what is the technical rules for all the traffic that is handled on the infrastructure managed by the DB Infra GO. So that those are the rules that you have to comply with if you want to run your trains on the German network, or at least the part of the German network that is controlled by Infra GO. And they typically have it for the current year and for the next year. So we have it for 2025 and for 2026 coming. And if you click on it, then you should be shown all the directives that are relevant. For example, the Signalbuch, and well, at least all the relevant directives that are for the public to access openly. And here you can find not only this, you can also find the Fahrdienstvorschrift 408 in its different parts, where you can find a lot about how to run your trains on the German network. But you can also find this, the 483 Zugbeeinflussanlagen bedienen, what is more or less operating safety systems. And there are a lot of different documents to be found dealing with PZB, and you can see it starts here already with PZB. So many directives required to run the PZB system. And here it starts with LZB, GNT, ETCS, and the Zugbeeinflussungssystem S-Bahn Berlin, what they use in Berlin, where is a thing on its own. And those rules actually have been changed from 2025 to 2026, or will be changed. I think it is the 15th of December 2025 when they will come into effect. And I wanted to look together with you on the new structure of these directives, so that you can read it up if you want. And two directives, or at least appendixes to those new directives, that give us a lot of insight that we need as the simulator playing community to learn how the cab display units in your trains are actually supposed to work and display all the indications that you need to run your train according to PZB properly. And this is what today's presentation will be about. So let's find my presentation and then turn it on. ZD says from September, Pendolino trains will start running south of Prague on a new line at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour. This will be the first time that the maximum speed limit of 160 kilometers per hour in the Czech Republic has been exceeded. Oh, that will be interesting. And I guess they will be running on ETCS, right? Presentation. So, German safety systems. And first, let's look at the structure that these directives have at the moment, and then we will look at the structure that they will get starting December 15, 2025 for 2026. So, yeah, PZB is complicated. Who would have thought that we need so many different documents to put out the rules, and it is still not enough. The first directive that you would tend to, if you want to know how to operate PZB, would be that one with the number 483 and then the 101. Makes a lot of sense. PZB, operating PZB, punktförmige Zugbeeinflussungsanlagen bedienen, allgemeiner Teil, the general part. And that gives you the basic idea about how this thing is supposed to work. Then there is an Appendix A 001 for trackside installations. You can find where the magnets are supposed to be installed. And then there is an Appendix 02 for train side installations, Fahrzeugeinrichtungen. Then there is one special appendix for the system Indusi 60M. We have talked about this in a couple of streams already. It is a very reduced system that only runs on the V60s, the little blue locomotive that CD Radar does not like, and it has its own system that only works in PZB mode U, lower mode, and with very slow speeds, and has its own appendix to the directive. And then there is an appendix for the abbreviations that are used. And then there is a lot of stuff, a lot of documents with the number 111, with 3 appendixes, and with 4 more documents with a V numbering. Yes, he's showing me his tongue, for different versions, for different devices that are built into your cabs that all run PZB system 90, but come with a different technical instances. So for I60R, I60ER24, Ereignis Recorder 24. Then there is one for PZ80R. We've discussed this in a different stream about the different Indusi and PZB versions. That is the system that was developed in the German Democratic Republic before the reunification of Germany. It also has its instance within the PZB 90 system with the Directive 112 in the end, with 3 appendixes and 3 V documents. Same thing for units that run PZB on an LZB unit, so locomotive can run both, and we have a computer more or less that can do the PZB as part of the LZB, and same goes for the EBICAP 500 system, Alstom system that we have on the Talent 2, for example, 111, 112, 113, 114. And you can see that the infrastructure manager actually issued some directives that does not only deal with the general operating of the system, but also how to operate specific systems that are running on trains. And you can see already the problem here. Who is running the trains? Not the infrastructure manager, but the train operating company, not the EIU, the Eisenbahninfrastrukturunternehmen, but the EVU, the Eisenbahnverkehrsunternehmen in German nomenclature. And so this was actually a problem, that the infrastructure manager was giving rules for stuff that was running on the trains that they did not run themselves, but the train operating companies were running, and so actually they should provide the rules for that. Thank you, CD Radar, for deleting this. And this was a problem, and this will be tackled with the new system in 2026. We will see how all those rules are getting kicked out and put into the competence of the train operating companies to provide. And then there is actually a nice sentence in the part that says, well, we will get a new directive where the infrastructure manager, the DB Infra GO, states that there are so many different variants being used by the train operating companies, and they don't tell us what they are using, so we can never provide proper directives that are to the point and complete. And so they should more or less do their stuff on their own, and we are just providing a framework. That is one part, and then on the other hand, the system with the directives that we're looking at the moment has grown over time, and it is a bit of a hodgepodge with all those special documents, and you never find what you're looking for because you don't know in what appendix or directive you have to look for it. So it's a bit hard to see the general guidelines, and this will be tackled, and the structure that the new directives will have are easier to grasp, in my opinion. So all that what I have on the tableau here is PZB. All these directives deal with the operation of PZB, and if you thought PZB is complicated, then it shows that it's quite complicated because you need so many rules and rule documents for it. PZB then is the 201, no longer the 101 for the general part, operating as a bit general part, and there was only one directive that dealt with a specific device built in the trains with the LZB 80 device, which was more or less the first one that was on the trains in use, and the more modern ones were no longer covered by a specific directive of that kind. So the 202 was actually only covering LZB 80 with 3 appendixes. And yeah, I don't know exactly for sure why there was never a directive covering the more current devices running LZB, maybe because there were not that many differences. So you could just use the same rules that were for LZB 80 in the other contexts, right? Then there is GNT. You remember the tilting trains like the 612 on Tarante Rampe, or the train that we are running at the moment, the ICET. Baureihe 411. It is not tilting on the line that we are running today, but it is tilting from Frankfurt to Fulda, for example. And there is a specific directive dealing with that. It is a Siemens system, a ZUB system, ZUB system with balises that does the special things for the tilting trains that allow them to go a bit faster, track speed limit wise. Then we have one directive, the 701, dealing with ETCS and operating ETCS units in the vehicles. And in between, since about 2011, I think 2012, there is a special train protection system that is only used by the S-Bahn in Berlin. We don't have it in the game yet, unfortunately. Maybe we will get it at some time because it is really unique, and it is a balise-based system developed by the Infra GO together with Siemens and the S-Bahn Berlin, and has a quite unique appearance, and should be something that I would strongly welcome to have it in the game, to have even more different safety systems. So this is what we have at the moment, the legacy directives for PZB, LZB, GNT, ZBS and ETCS. All of them are mentioned here. You can see it's quite a bunch of text and documents, and this will now be put into a more graspable system. And on the other hand, the distribution of rules made by the infrastructure manager and the train operating company will be put into a state that conforms with the European law idea of distributing the competences between the infrastructure manager and the train operating company properly. So more or less, the infrastructure manager should provide a framework and the rules for the trackside installations, and the train operating companies should make the rules for how those trains and the stuff that is running on the trains can actually comply with those rules. So let's see what will be new now. The 483 system, as it will be starting December 25 and then in the year 2026. Let's just go through all of them and see what survives and what does not. The general part directive with the 101 for PZB will survive, but it gets a different title. It is now only called Operating PZB Units, what is more or less the same way of saying like ETCS Fahrzeugeinrichtungen bedienen, LZB Fahrzeugeinrichtungen bedienen. So we are dealing with how to use those units. Trackside installation appendix also survives, because this is what the infrastructure manager does. So there will be a directive dealing with where the magnets will be planted and how all this is done. But then you see, that was what the train side installation was. This will vanish actually, because train side installations is more or less, at least from the outset, a thing that the train operating companies have to rule or provide rules for. And this is why all those very specific directives dealing with the different ways of building a PZB system on a train also are no longer there, at least not in the form that they used to be there. What happens with this Appendix 03 that dealt with this special PZB system I60M for the V60 locomotives? It will survive, but it gets a different number. It is now 101 Z02. That is a little directive that deals with the I60M units. Actually, my spaces are not in the correct place here all the time. It's usually I space 60M, but this should not be the problem. The abbreviations also stay. So the Appendix 99 for the abbreviations, it only gets a different name. It is no longer called abbreviations, but a list of abbreviations or directory of abbreviations. But it will be still there. So in case you can't understand the directives because you don't know what the abbreviations actually mean, you can look it up in this one. And fine. And now what is completely new to the system of how to organizing it is this directive. It is the 100, no longer the 101, but the 100. And it has the complicated name Ausführungsbestimmungen für unternehmensspezifische Vorgaben zur Ergänzung der Richtlinie 483-010X. And I translated this more or less with rules for train operating companies, rules regarding PZB. So those are the rules for how and where train operating companies can, may, or have to provide the rules for the operation of PZB. So it is like an envelope telling us where the rules for actually operating PZB units on the trains are coming from and how those must be structured. So it is like the framework for the rules that are to be set by the train operating companies. And we will have a bit of more framework rules that are set by the infrastructure manager, and those are in the appendices 2 and further on. And those two appendixes that we will see next, the A02, indicator-based cap indications, and that one display-based cap indications in appendix A03 are super gold for the train simulator community, because those two directives actually tell us how the indicators should behave in certain situations that you can encounter in your PZB environment. And be it on an indicator-based cap thingy or on a display-based cap. So you know that a lot because we have many different locomotives and they all look a bit different. Some have only indicators, some have a display, some have a different display, some have text messages, some don't have text message, some have round indicators, some have square indicators, and those two directives tell you how this should be done. And in this one, in the A03, there is also stated for the first time specifically that on those display-based cap layouts without text messages, we should get back the alternating flashing of the 85 and the 70 indicator in case of a restricted monitoring. That what is missing, for example, on the 411. train here in the game, and where people have been wondering how it should be done and why is there nothing in the directives that are provided by the DB Infra GO at the moment, and here it is now. So those two directives are really great. I recommend to study that to understand how the cap indicators on the trains, on the different trains, are actually supposed to behave. It can be modified in certain ways, obviously, but this gives us a very substantial basic understanding of how those cap indications actually are supposed to work. Then we have general train data tables. What is important if we run the Expert 101 locomotive, for example, where we have to put in train data. Typically, we don't do this in train sim world. This is more or less skipped or done for us, but in the Expert 101 we have to input train data, and you might, if you have played this before, remember that every locomotive has more or less its own data table where you have to check out what numbers you have to punch in for certain brake modes or brake settings or whatever. And here you have some general train data tables in case you don't have any specific ones. And then there is the Appendix 05 for the handling of certain anomalies and faults, Umgang mit bestimmten Unregelmäßigkeiten und Störungen, what was or what is at the time being dispersed all through different appendixes on those directives that were listed in the middle that are connected with the different ways of building a PZB system on your train. So this is more or less the framework that the infrastructure manager is providing, and that is giving us a general thing for how the PZB should behave, and there is a lot of more order and method in this way of putting it than it was when everything was dispersed along different appendixes and directives for different ways of building your PZB system on the train. So what room is then there for rules that the train operating companies can set? We will get to this. Another idea, obviously, if the infrastructure manager realizes that it cannot force rules onto the train operating companies how to deal with their devices running on their trains, because of the separations between competences between infrastructure manager and train operating company, then we still can suggest. But before we can go to this, one thing that I almost forgot, the Z01 is for a special variant of the PZB 90 program, the AVG variant. We don't have it in the game from what I know. Also a thing that we should explore maybe with future DLCs, also something that is out of the ordinary. But back to what I just said, if we cannot force the train operating companies to have specific rules and our rules, and if we cannot put our rules on them, then we can still suggest. So Beispiele für bauformspezifische Unternehmensvorgaben zur PZB Fahrzeugeinrichtung. So this is examples for the rules that the train operating companies are supposed to provide for their specific systems that they are running on their trains to comply with the PZB. And yeah, in case the train operating company does not know better or is too lazy to make its own rules, then they can just take the rules that are provided by the infrastructure manager here. And here we find again all the things that we had in specific directives. That is the I60R with an indicator block that then comes up in Appendix 10, and then with the Event Recorder 24 is Appendix 11. PZ80R, that was the one from the German Democratic Republic, is now Appendix 12. If we have combined PZB LZB computers, it's Appendix A13, and for the ABCAP 500, the Alstom computer, it's the I14. So in case of you are running a train operating company, you can take this as a base, and either you can leave it at this or you can amend it or supplement it and then you have your own set of rules. So infrastructure manager gives a framework. It tells the train operating companies in what way they can have their own rules, modify them, put their own rules on top of it, and they suggest a set of rules for different PZB systems on the vehicles that the train operating companies can use if they don't have any better ideas. Last thing that I have found, there is also now a 102 directive that deals with a special PZB 90 version that runs on S-Bahn Hamburg. So, you can see, apart from our PZB 90 that we more or less know in different systems built in the trains, we also have a directive dealing with the variant for the PZB 90 AVG. We have a directive dealing with the PZB 90 in S-Bahn Hamburg, and we have a special directive for the PZB form I60M, what is not PZB 90, but it is the only current non-PZB 90 PZB version that there is still running as far as I can see. Did it get easier? Did it get less complicated for PZB? Probably not, but it is easier to see through these directives, I think, and it is a clearer cut between rules provided by the infrastructure manager and rules provided by the train operating companies. Do we have similar changes to LZB, GNT and so on as well? Yes, we have. Also, the LZB general part gets a different title. This one retains the Allgemeine Teil, unlike the PZB directive. And here we only had one directive dealing with a special system on the train. It is now called Führraumanzeige und Bedienung, cap indications and operations of PZB, and the numbering stays the same, but it is no longer only connected with the LZB 80, but for all the systems more or less. And we also get one of those envelope the directives, the 200, that tells us how the train operating companies can modify and amend the rules set out by the infrastructure manager. So same system of regulation here, one document that tells us how train operating companies can modify, amend or deviate from rules that the infrastructure manager set. For GNT we do exactly the same. Those appendixes are actually removed. We only have a 301 directive, and we also get this envelope directive to go with it, so that we can see how the train operating companies can modify the rules provided by the infrastructure manager. ZBS actually does not get touched, and the ETCS directive does not get touched either. So only PZB, LZB and GNT will get a new set of rules for the year 2026, actually coming into force from what I have read in December 2025. And this is actually quite a big step of getting all those rules on a new foundation. And for us in the train simulating company or train simulator community, we have a lot of new stuff to learn about what is used in the S-Bahn Hamburg, what is used in S-Bahn Berlin, the PZB 90 AVG variant, the I60M for example, and the indicators and displays. And to get on top of that much better, obviously we will not be able to learn all the train operating company rules, because they will probably not be published, but will be only for internal use. But we have at least the suggestions that the infrastructure manager gives them, and then we have at least a solid foundation for our experience in the game. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this synopsis of the old and the new regulation. What I wanted still to show you is how this working together between the infrastructure manager and the train operating company actually works with those sets of rules. And for that I have a logic experiment, or an experiment how to put this logic into a picture or a graphical representation. So here from top to bottom we have the range of possible behavior, and from left to right in different situations. This is well, my logic model that I'm using, right? In different situations you have a different range of possible behavior, and then there is typically every time a set of actions that are mandatory in a specific situation, a set of actions that are prohibited in this situation, and in between there are all the optional actions that you can do. So some actions you just have to do, like pushing your Wachsamkeitstaste, your acknowledge key, within a certain time frame, and other actions that are prohibited, like running a red signal. But in between there is a lot of leeway for optional actions, like do you want to accelerate after the limit increases and you have to stop in 2 or 3 kilometers anyway or not. So this is up to you. It is also up to you whether you release from 1000 hertz monitoring after the yellow lamp turned off and you can see that the signal is green. You can release, but you do not necessarily do it. And someone has to specify the border between mandatory actions, optional actions, and prohibited actions in different situations. And who does this? So the infrastructure manager sets the first set of rules for that. I've left away all the rules that are already provided by the law and different pieces of law, just going into this set that can be modified by the infrastructure manager. They set a rule for a set of rules that give you the border between mandatory and optional actions in different situations, obviously also for prohibited actions. So all the actions that are in the blue area here are mandatory according to the rules set by the infrastructure manager. On the bottom, all the actions within the blue area are prohibited actions according to the set of rules. And then there is some room that is set for rules set by the train operating company, in German terms the EVU, the Eisenbahnverkehrsunternehmen. So that sits on top of the border, and so the train operating companies can add their own rules and limit more and more the leeway that the driver has in between. So what is left then is driver's discretion, best practice. You can see sometimes the rules are so strict that there is no leeway anymore between the mandatory and the prohibited actions, and the driver has to just comply with the rules. So this is the general idea, a framework set by the infrastructure manager, and the train operating company can set rules on top of it, further limiting the optional actions, the leeway that the driver has in between. But it is not so easy actually, because there are some areas where the infrastructure manager sets rules, but those rules can be modified by train operating company rules. Whereas within the areas where the train operating company can set their rules, there are certain areas where the train operating companies are required to make and have their own rules. It's not up to them to make rules, it is up to them what rules man makes. What the fuck? How did that come in now? Disturbing my lecture about how to set rules here. So in those areas, it is up to the train operating companies what rules they make, but it is not up to them whether they make rules or not. So they have to provide rules for those situations. And last but not least, there are actually some areas where Infrastructure manager provides rules, but the train operating companies are required to modify those rules or amend them. So it is not so trivial, this working together between the infrastructure manager and the train operating companies to set some rules, and where those borders are, to what area a certain area of ruling belongs. All these things are discussed and regulated in those envelope directives, the 100, the 200 and the 300, for example. This defines in what areas the train operating companies may set their own rules, where they have to modify infrastructure manager rules, and so on. So this was my attempt on putting it in the graphical representations, how not trivial this working together between the infrastructure manager and the train operating company can look. And now something more graspable. Again, let's look at those two directives that I mentioned. The one that tells us how the indicator-based cap indications for PZB work and the display-based cap indications work, and they use different distinctions. They have some rules for systems that operate PZB without handling PZB at the same time, and they have rules for systems that handle PZB as part of LZB running, or with LZB running at the same time on the same system. So a system that can handle PZB and LZB at the same time, whereas those systems also only handle PZB without at the same time handling PZB. And the most simple and the most commonplace system here would be this Leuchtmelder block, indicator block. This you can find on many trains. I got this picture from the Talent 1 in Vorarlberg, but you can find them on many different vehicles in the game. 3 indicators for LZB, and then the white Befehl 40, the red 500, and the yellow 1000 Hertz. This is called a Leuchtmelder block, and it has a certain behavior described in this appendix to the 101 directive. Then there is something that is called Leuchtmelder Einheit. I have not found an example in the game so far. You can see that below this row of 2 by 3 indicators, there is also a S, a G, and Stör for malfunction indicator. So it is a 3 by 3 matrix. If you know any vehicle in the game that uses this, let me know. I have not found an example. Then there is a thing that comes from the German democratic systems. Again, it's an Anzeigeeinheit, it is called, what is more or less the German word for display unit, and it looks like this. And at first I thought, where would I found an example for this one? And after searching a bit, there is actually at least one locomotive in the game that uses a PZB display unit of that kind, and well, the guesses are on. It is the Baureihe 204, the switcher. And this thing actually uses this here. So maybe we should look into this more deeply in a special stream, now that I know that we actually have one of those in the game. Last thing that uses only PZB on indicator-based indications is the modulare Führerraum-Anzeigegerät type 7/1, what is a modular cap display unit of the type 7/1, and those you can find in a lot of locomotives. You have those square indicators, you have your 3 PZB indicators, the blue ones, and then the white and the red and the yellow one underneath. So this indicator block is integrated here, and then typically you have a SIFA light, a door indicator, Notbremsüberbrückungsindicator, train line Hauptschalter an und aus on the left, and then on the right here, where it is free, this is where the LZB indicators would sit. And also here in the middle, where you can only see this this tin, This is where the indicator for the distance indicator for the LZB would sit if there was an LZB, but on the MFA 7/1 there is no LZB at the same time. This one I took from the Baureihe 143 that does not run LZB at the same time. At least in this variant here. So on the left side here, indicator based, not display, but lamps that light up actually. And no LZB. Here we have on this side the modulare Führerraumanzeigerät, the modular cab display unit type 7 without a stroke 1, and this is more or less the MFA 7 version with LZB. This one I took from the Baureihe 112, what is a pimped up version of the 143, and here you can see, well, not only that it is beige instead of blue, I can see in the middle the distance indicator for the LZB, and you can see here on the right side the H, the G, the E40, EL, and all the indicators that you use for LZB and for the LZB Aufträge, Ersatzauftrag, Vorsichtsauftrag, and so on, and the indications for the brakes and stuff, and the B and U are the most important indicators for the LZB. Then getting more modern, here are the rectangular indicators, and then on the modular cab indicator device type 20, the MFA 20, you have those round indicators, and this you find a lot, especially on the older versions of the S-Bahn trains, the 425, for example. I think also the 422 or the 423, I don't know, there are maybe different versions. Some of them are already using display versions, but the 425 uses those round indicators. Also the 406 ICE from Schnellfahrstrecke Köln, that also appears here on the Pfälzische Ludwigsbahn with those round indicators, set up quite similar to the rectangular one of the MFA 7, but here MFA 20, also indicator based with LZB, as you can see in the middle. Display then, this one I got from the 425. The display then distinguishes between three things. The first one would be the display based indications that also run PZB without at the same time running LZB. For example, found on the Talent 2, the 442. No indications for LZB, but display, everything appears in the display. It is not longer used with lamps and indicators, and you have those text messages. The PZB only display versions seem to always sport the text messages. Whereas if you combine it with a system that can also run LZB and put it on a display, here you have some systems that work with text messages and some systems that work without text messages. A system that can do PZB and LZB and still uses text messages, for example, runs on the Truck 3 in the game, Baureihe 187, maybe the most ill-famed locomotive in the game, but at least it is good for providing an example for systems that still use text messages even though they are running LZB. Whereas most of the modern locomotives and trains in the game that use those split screens that also have the ETCS icons running, they don't use text messages anymore, but they are using indicators on the display, and here you can finally find the description that you should get alternatingly flashing indicators for 75 and for 70 and 85 in case of a restricted monitoring. And to show you that I am not promising too much in this context, I actually planned on showing you the directive in question. Do I still have it on anywhere? Yeah, here you can see it. This is the 43.101 Appendix 02 for the lamp-based ones. I will skip that because I just wanted to show you the one for the display-based ones, and that would be the display ones here, displaybasierte Führerraum anzeigen. And here you can find all the different indications that you can see on your cab display in whatever situation that can occur. You can see a list of possible text messages if you have a system that is actually using text messages still. And then here you have for the different states the system can be in, and it is shown for PZB only, and on the bottom on the left for PZB LZB units with text, and PZB LZB without text to the right. And then if we actually try to find a restricted monitoring example, we just scroll downwards to find something of that kind. And here we are already. Startprogramm, wirksames Startprogramm. That is the starting program, and here in the starting program without text messages we would have the icon for alternating flashing of 85 and 70, and the same would be if we find a restricted monitoring. Wirksame kurze restriktive 500 Überwachung. This is a restrictive 500, and here you have the alternating flashing of 85 and 70 with the red 500 Hertz indicator. What is not done in most of those systems in the game that are running it. If you have a text message, you don't have the alternating flashing, because then you have the text message showing you that you're restricted to 25, and for the restrictive thing, you can go through the directive and find all the restrictive monitorings, and you will find the Wechselblinken, the alternating flashing of those two things, those two indicators. The only train that I have seen in the game that is doing this properly is the MFD version of the Expert 101. The Expert 101 with the MFD, with the display, it shows the alternating flashing of 70 and 85. No text messages there, and the alternating flashing is provided. So kudos to TSG for that. Guys, we made it through the presentation. That was quite heavy stuff, I am sure, and it also emphasizes that PZB is really some complicated stuff, but what is great is that we can find a lot of the documentation in the new directives that are or will come in force in December 2025 for the years to come. And now to the easy part, let's get the train home. We're still here at Neustadt and the Weinstraße, waiting for the passengers to board, and then to run our train to Mannheim.
Schließvorgang eingeleitet.
Train is held by the AFB holding brake. And here's the rain. And if I did not miss it through the presentation, we're still... Oh, we're not. Actually, yeah. We are in a 100 limit. We did not make use of it before stopping because we had to stop. But this does not change the fact. Lofty, after finishing eating, I get back to the stream and the rain starts typically. Yes, the rain is here. And you missed a lot of complicated stuff about the PZB regulations. So maybe the rain is the least. No, I saw all that. I was just too busy eating to respond. Alright. Then it's just the rain you have to bother with. Well, I told you that after Neustadt and the Weinstraße, the scenery will change significantly. And it did. At least the weather changed significantly. But also the scenery. I have much more open land now. Not those ravines and woodland. Getting closer to the Rhine. See, the radar says, I don't know about you, but here rain is synonymous with this whole summer. Well, in June we did not have a single drop of rain almost. The ground was crumbling underneath the hoofs of our horses and our feet respectively. And now in July we get a lot of rain. I just hope that the soil can get all... So that is actually quite an interesting thing. I don't know if you know if this has been discussed in any developer stream. We are getting this signal, what is typically close the main circuit breaker signal. That is also the same signal on the other side. Without having had a signal that orders us to open the main circuit breaker. And after a while, we encounter a signal that orders us to close the main circuit breaker again. So if anyone knows what is the big idea behind those signals, please let me know. This might be some special situation. why we are ordered to close our main circuit breaker. In these situations, if there is anything that kicks out our main circuit breaker automatically, so we have to put it back in or whatever, I'd be very thankful and grateful for that, because our main circuit breaker did not get kicked. There's no need to put it in again. So at the moment I'm at a loss. I'm not understanding those signals. And CD Radar says he's been looking forward to 40 degrees Celsius all winter, and instead it just keeps raining and raining and it is cold. Oh, I'm afraid we will have your 40 degrees Celsius soon. So I'm happy about every drop of rain that we can get. Maybe not if they cause landslides or stuff like this. But in general, you might have noticed now we are in the high-speed part. Well, relatively high-speed part. As fast as we can go without LZB or ETCS or yeah. This yellow L is one of the few instances where you don't have to acknowledge something yellow. Just announcing that we are routed towards L, what might be Ludwigshafen. By the way, I meant to do an unboxing stream for the Baureihe, well, the class 86/2 and Preston Carlisle. We played a lot with the 87 there, and like 2 weeks ago the 86 was released, but for whatever reasons they have at Epic or DTG, they were not able to give me the Epic key to this DLC until now. So I hope I will get it next week. Well, I meant to do a stream last week unboxing the 86, but I was just not able to do this. I did not want to do it on my stream, on my Steam account. But here on the Epic Game Store account. And I'm still waiting. But probably next week we will be doing an unboxing stream about the Turbostar DLC. Turbostar gameplay pack from Rivet in Birmingham and some other routes. We will get 2 subclasses of the 170 Turbostars. I think the Stroke 5 and the Stroke 6. So far we only have the one that runs in the 5 circle line. And we get the cross country, and don't know at the moment what the second one will be. At least this is what is out in the open. And as soon as it is released, I think I will do an unboxing stream for those trains. Now signal speed limit to 100.
Beeinflussen.
Because we will probably go across a switch. Repeater.
Zug beeinflussen.
Actually misread my speed clock. Thought we are already below the 100. Well, we went. Well, we still made it in time. And here's the switch that we slowed down for. And another one. Apparently switching over to the slow lines. And I think as soon as we're through, we can accelerate to 160 again. We have 10 minutes for 5.7 kilometers, so you don't really need to push it so hard, but maybe if we do, we get a signal at the end that we have to react to. At the moment we're just getting a slowdown to 130.
Zug beeinflussen.
But I can see the VR0 coming up already.
Zug beeinflussen.
Even with a with a short braking distance warning, so slowing down quite harshly to the 60. In case we get a 500 hertz. And since the signals are already just around the corner here, can already see them, we're slowing down. But from what I've seen, our signal just changed and we're getting a 500 hertz anymore. I think this will allow us to go with 60. It's an HP2 with an ZS3 CAN-6. Allows us to go 60.
Zug beeinflussen. Zug beeinflussen.
But obviously the next VR0 60 for this switch apparently. Now we're at Ludwigshafen. Because of the rain you probably can't see it that well. Driving towards this impressive bridge. If you look at it in the diagram, there is a lot of track here at this yard and junction. Let's see if we have to stop at the end of the corner. The repeaters are still at VR0. But no, that's not ours. That's not ours as it seems. That's still not ours. Now that one is finally for us. $500 Hz. See that we don't drop below the 10, so that we don't go into the restricted monitoring. Will I read Juniper's message before I stop? Probably after, otherwise I might not be able to stop. Going up the gradient, it is always a big help if you want to slow down. Now we are probably already in the restricted monitoring. And it switched. Made it without stopping. Since we are probably in the restricted monitoring, as long as the red lamp is on, we should not go faster than 20. Now it came off, we can actually release. We got a full and high green. We can go back to line speed. Whatever line speed is at this point here. It is 80. Alright. Now I can read Juniper's message. I haven't seen it rain as hard as it has recently for a while, having to drive 40 kilometers per hour on the highway because the wipers on max speed, so I can't see anything. True enough. True enough. I was out in the open this morning and set a 7 we're getting for going on the opposite track. 60 indicated. And I actually got wet to the bones. That's a bit my concern, that it is raining so hard that the soil cannot actually get all the water, and then we lose more earth due to the rain and flooding than we would use and lose to the wind when it is dry. It's all not so easy. Ludwigshafen Mitte. Look at this interesting construction of a station roof going more or less directly onto the bridge. Here's the repeater for the VR2 set as 3V6. So this part through Ludwigshafen and then to Mannheim. Oh. What did I do with the Ziefahrtsbremsung? Probably because I was turning the camera. This had some weird repercussions on the CIFA system, but Zwangsbremsung can be released without doing any harm. That was nice. You were not pressing CIFA nonsense. No, I was actually pressing CIFA all the time because I held the key down for the camera to rotate faster, I think. And pressing down CIFA pedal all the time is as bad as not pressing it. So we're early at Mannheim. I can't really remember whether I was at Mannheim last time for a concert or for a conference. It has a very unique structure for a German city because it has squares, almost like an American city. And those squares are numbered. And so are the platforms, obviously. Here you can see to the left, Fahrtanzeiger lit, even though the signal is at red. It's probably not as it is supposed to be.
SIFA. SIFA.
Now she got a second air, the SIFA lady. Siri says, lucky you, I have never been in Mannheim and probably never will. Yeah, why not? It looks a bit dull here. But this might be due to the rain. Blop, and already taken over by a colleague. Look, we actually made it without getting docked for speeding, and I lost two points for 2 seconds in my on-time bonus. Apart from that, it was quite nice. Germany can be beautiful, says Juniper, as long as you stay as far away as possible from Duisburg. Okay. Well, I don't think I ever was to Duisburg, so I cannot really say. Guys, that was quite heavy stuff today in the presentation, but I think those new regulations for PZB will actually give us a lot of opportunity to understand more of what the trains and vehicles are supposed to be doing and what indicators should be flashing in what situations and everything. So I'm really happy that I stumbled across this. What the hell is this icon doing? See, the radar is rolling through wherever this is. Too small, I cannot see. Honey's flip, he says. All right, beautiful. Anyway, thank you so much for bearing with me, and I hope I will be back during the course of next week with 1 or 2 unboxing streams, and then next weekend probably with the first unit in the 101 expert regarding train data, but I will see. I will have to see how I get around with all the stuff that I have to get on top of. Lofty, Juniper, CD Radar, thank you so much. Be nice to each other, have a great time, and see you soon.